I am your show host, Chris Reshitar, licensed loan officer with NFM Lending. And as you know, we always bring on our show every week area experts and special guests. And this week we have special guest Horace Bryant from Bryant Realtors and expert contributor back Preston Salen. And our show lineup here today, and Horace, with your help, we've laid out a really fun theme for the show, and that's we're going to be really talking about tips for the move-up buyer. And what I mean by that, and Horace, you can jump in because you're really the real realtor extraordinaire expert here, not me. But my understanding is a move-up buyer is somebody that was previously a first-time buyer that's now ready to move into that second or even maybe third home. Perhaps your family size has grown. Perhaps you want to be closer to work because you're tired of the commute. Maybe you're looking for a different school system, and it could be a completely different reason. Maybe that you're ready for something nicer and newer because you've earned a better income and you've got some equity in your home.
Yeah, I think that's a great lead in there, Chris. So you're correct. It's usually an individual who's purchased a home before. Most instances, it's going to be an individual who's purchased their first home and are looking to purchase a new home for whatever reason. We can talk about those in a moment. But we also do have a lot of individuals who may, as you mentioned, be on their second or third home who are looking for something different. So basically moving from one home to the next. And you touched on it as well. There are lots of factors that can impact why the individual is looking to go from one level to the next.
Okay, cool. So let's, what are some of the ones that you identify?
Yeah, so one of the first things that we want our clients to do is really think about what their motivation for moving up is. We ask them to ask themselves, did you get married? Did you move in with someone? Are you expecting a child? It could be something as simple as they got a dog, and wherever they are, maybe it's a townhome that doesn't allow dogs.
That's a great point. And you should buy a new house if you get a new dog.
Right, yeah, of course, right.
We should all hang out at the pet store.
That's right.
That's a strategy.
It's got a referral at the pet store.
Right. Who bought a dog? Right, there you go. And then the others that come to mind pretty easily is someone may just simply want something that's bigger. Maybe there's an amenity in that house, in a new home that they're looking for. Maybe it's a bonus room. Maybe they've had kids and gotten married and need something different, or looking for different schools. So there's a multitude of reasons, but we start at the very basic, which is, what do you see in that new home as you're looking forward? Right? What does that nirvana look like?
I just had one not that long ago, and they were moving because they didn't like their neighbors.
It could be as simple as that.
They didn't like their neighbors, so they were
before.
selling and buying a house.
Was that my neighbors?
You did move out of my neighborhood. Maybe it was you.
Was that Preston next door? Yeah.
I've learned that maybe we should hang out the pet store, the maternity ward, or what's the
Where
other?
else? I don't know.
Those are the hot spots.
Yeah,
Schools,
yeah.
right? Hang out
Weddings.
at the hospital.
Weddings, yeah.
So very good. I mean, definitely, obviously, we're going to kind of roll out the tips at this point. We're having a little bit of fun here. So let's get specific here and kind of lay out what the tips are here we have for the move-up buyer. So the number one tip here that we have rolling out this morning is determine the time frame of the move in and move out, or move out or move in. Usually it's the out then the in, right? I got that backwards. Yeah. So talk to us about tip number one in planning that timeline.
Yeah, so we call this scenario kind of the perfect storm of real estate, right? You've got all these moving parts. You have to sell a house, you have to buy a house, and so all of these stars just have to align perfectly. And so it's really about looking at what that time frame looks like, and that's really where we come in as realtors. I've seen some things where people refer to us as real estate consultants, and that's really is what you're doing. You're building some rapport, you're consulting, you're allowing individuals to understand exactly what that time frame looks like. So the first step, to your point, is what is that time frame? How do we help you determine the selling timeline? How long will your house take to sell? And then leading into what does the time frame look like for buying? And so that's really where we come in assisting folks.
And I honestly would jump in and say you really oftentimes are your real estate counselors.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime you move, period, right, you still have to work your job, you're still taking your kids kids to soccer, like your life doesn't change, but then all of a sudden you have to move everything that you own out of your house, and you're doing it until like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you have no sleep,
Absolutely.
right? And you're like, oh crap, I didn't pay that electric bill, and you have so many more details to manage that you end up doing therapy with your clients. I mean, I really respect.
Absolutely. You manage a lot of marriages, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that you know, the tips for the move up buyer
Tell
is
me about your mother.
yeah. Tip number one, Richie, which is, you know, the time frame, is you really need to have this discussion with a professional realtor and let them help you bear that burden, because a realtor's role is to help you through that process. All right, so let's go to tip number 2, and you say is start preparing the current home to be sold.
Absolutely. So in most instances, individuals have to sell their existing home in order to buy the new home. That's not always the case for everyone. Some cases people will rent it out or move a family member in.
Or they can qualify for 2 house payments.
That's correct.
That's a luxury.
Absolutely. You know, that's the exception and not the norm, but we've seen many people who have been able to do that. And so we try to get our folks to try to keep their eye on the prize, which is, I have to sell this house and I have to do all of those things that are needed in order to sell that house. And some of those things could include staging the house, obviously cleaning, decluttering the home. You know, one of the things that we've been seeing much more of is this potential for repairs or renovations. You know, we've been trying to explain to our clients that there really is a benefit to having a home inspected. We call it a pre-inspection before you sell it. And obviously with Preston here, I'm sure he can add some color to that piece of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-inspections are a great idea because, you know, sometimes when deals go sideways because of the inspection, it's because 2 parties made a financial compromise, then they did the inspection that has financial implications, and neither person wants to compromise twice.
Absolutely.
And if you could find out those things ahead of time, you know, you probably could get multiple bids, you know, and maybe get it done for, but you know, you find out the cards on the table and you don't have that surprise on the back end, and just keeps deals from going sideways. And I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. All right, so, and I'm just going to kind of recap there so our listener can connect with us. So since we're talking about the move up buyer, and we're kind of, you know, one of the tips, tip number 2 was really kind of get your house ready to be sold. What you would do as the seller, not the buyer,
right,
is you would call Preston from Home Inspection Carolina and say, hey, we'd like your team to come out, inspect this house, just to see what maybe is going on with the property, if there's any issues with the HVAC system, or we have an issue with water in the crawl space, whatever it might be. You can predetermine those things before you list the home for sale and address the repairs and get lots of bids on your own timeline, get fair bids, not be under the pressure of a contract and a buyer nipping at your heels. And then you know going in, hey, before we list this home, we've addressed the issues, this house is in good shape. Go ahead, Preston.
Can I add one
Yeah,
little thing to it? The elephant in the room with pre-inspections is, though, that, you know, the seller does all these repairs, and then the buyer comes in with their inspector, and they find a whole lot more stuff, and now we got to do the repairs twice. That will happen, but what we're trying to do is just find the major items that could kill a deal. I think set expectations. Home inspection is a subjective thing, but that inspector is going to come in and find, you know, some rubbing doors, you know, but shouldn't kill a deal. If there's ever anything major that you know, that first inspector missed, they should refund their money.
Yeah.
So we're just looking for the major things that could cause the deal to go sideways.
The W2, what is it, WD-40/duct tape can fix that. All that stuff.
Are you sure you haven't been talking to my neighbors?
Yeah, and I think I love kind of what both of you are saying. I mean, I've seen us lose too many deals to home inspections, and I like the idea, and I've seen how positive it is to actually have it done up front, and you know what you know up front, and you address it up front.
Yeah.
But to Preston's point, chances are the buyer is still going to do a home inspection, but you would hope that those larger items you have addressed up front, and you're not going to lose a deal over those
Right,
issues.
right.
So yeah,
So that's
great
why I always
points.
try to set expectations,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I can guarantee you that guy's not going to come in and say, "Oh, it's perfect."
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. All right, let's go to tip number 3. It says, look at the school calendar.
Yeah, and so what you'll find is that many sellers are, you know, especially if they've got small kids, are tied to a school calendar. And what that means is that, you know, we're going to see it in the next couple of months where a lot of homes are going to start hitting the market, you know, sometimes around spring break, but definitely during those summer months, May and June. And so we really try to manage our sellers' expectation that many of their neighbors' homes are going to hit the market. They're going to have a lot more competition. And so in some instances, there's some value to listing a little bit ahead of that. But we always want to keep the school calendar in mind, whether you have kids or not, because that's going to actually impact your pool of potential buyers, as well as other sellers who could hit the market as the summer warms up.
Perfect, okay. And then tip number 4 is actually plan time to look for the new home. So while you're selling, you still have to plan time to look for the new home.
Yeah, and that sounds, you know, pretty
Basic?
but we have folks who are on both ends of the scale. We've got those folks who are spending so much time preparing their existing home that they're not thinking about the new home yet. And then we have folks who are off and running, you know, ready to put an offer in on a new home, but really haven't prepared their home, their existing home, for sale. And so
Seems
again,
like the latter is more common.
Well, that's what I was
Probably.
going to say.
Yeah,
That's-
absolutely.
I told my wife, we're not even going to look at a new home until we get this thing under contract.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, and again, sometimes it's the difference between him and her, you know, the wife and the husband. But we want to try to keep everybody on the same page and understand that it is a balancing act as it relates to timing between selling and buying.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So, well, we've got a lot more show to talk about here, but we're running out of our 12-minute segment here. We got to take a quick break. Again, you're listening to Reshitar Radio. I'm your show host, Chris Reshitar, and we are talking about tips for the move-up buyer. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're great at this, man.
Really?
I know.
That's
You're
not
going to
even-
make Horace a
Unbelievable.
regular person on the show.
All right, so before we roll back in,
So I jumped around a little bit.
Yes, I need to kind of figure out. So we got to 4 tips, but then I see we're starting back at 1. So how would you like me to
So we're at 4 tips. So we
Do
did
you
the
want
4
me to-
tips.
change these to 5, 6, 7, or do we just?
Which comes first? So we did the 4 tips, and then the thought was that the next question should be which comes first, right? Is it shopping or selling? I think we've touched on that a little bit.
We did. I think we could be fine not hitting that again. Let's
Okay,
see
so
what I want.
typically it's typically home evaluated. We touched on keep it sound, and maybe we.
I think maybe we just say we start in like tip 5.
Yeah,
is
that-
have your home evaluated for readiness under the following areas. I know we already talked about pre-inspection,
Yeah.
but we really didn't hit some of these areas, right? Or have CMA. No, tip 5 would be have a CMA.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. 6, get pre-qualified is 7.
Mhm.
I don't think number 5 means a number where it says remember. Be aware local markets vary. Okay, so that's more of a 7 is, number 8 is be aware of local markets, right? 7 becomes number 9, work closely with your reps.
Okay.
You good?
I'll follow your lead. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll number them, but I'll lead it.
As you lead in,
I'll
I'll
lead it
know
in.
where you are.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Okay, let's get this going. Welcome back to Reshitar Radio. I'm your show host.